What is up, everybody? My name is Justin. This is Forever Self-Employed. In today's video, I got a special guest. Paul is with me, and we're going to be talking about how to make $1,000 a day cutting grass in your lawn care business. Paul, how's it going, man?
Good, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So for anybody who doesn't know, Paul runs the Green Industry Podcast, and he had me on pretty recently. And so I figured it only fitting for you to come on and share with my audience as well.
Totally, man. Good to talk to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Happy to have you with us today. So like I said, we're going to be covering a lot about lawn care today. I don't cover a ton about lawn care on my channel, so I'm hoping this is going to be very beneficial for a lot of people out there. One thing I do want to mention before we get into the video, Paul, is this video is sponsored by Quote IQ. We're doing a truck giveaway to a premium or platinum subscriber of Quote IQ. So if you guys need help keeping up with customers, sending estimates, invoices, or collecting payments, check out Quote IQ, linked in the comment section and the description of this video. But with that out of the way, I kind of want to talk about lawn care from a really high level. I think we all know lawn care is like, if you got a lawnmower, you can go out and provide a service for people. But I want to talk about the higher end, Paul. So first and foremost, tell us about how long you've been in the lawn care industry and kind of what got you into that space in the first place.
Yes, sir. So in 2011, my friend Christian Lewis was doing music, and Randy Jackson. This story goes full circle, but Randy Jackson was on American Idol at the time. It was a big deal, and he had heard my friend Christian singing one day, and he's like, "Dude, this guy's anointed." He was in like a studio setting, so he's like, "We got to call this guy." So he gets his number and he calls my friend Christian Lewis, and the phone rings, and Christian picks up, and he's like, "Hey, it's Randy Jackson," and my friend Christian starts laughing and hangs up because he thought it was one of his buddies prank calling him. Because in the music world, Randy Jackson was like the gatekeeper. And so Randy was like, he hung up on me. So he called him back again, and he's like, "Hey, this is Randy Jackson." And my friend's like, "Yeah, right." And he's like, "No, it really is." And he's like, I'm hanging out with so-and-so, and I just heard you. And I'd love to meet you. I'll come to Atlanta and meet you. Meet me at this restaurant in Buckhead, on Friday or whatever. So my friend hangs up the phone, and his wife's like, "Who is that?" And he's like, "Randy Jackson." And she started laughing. She's like, "Yeah, right. It's probably one of your friends joking." So Friday night comes, and he's like, "No, I really think it was him." So he goes down to Buckhead, still not knowing if it's a prank or not. And he goes to this steakhouse. He's like, "There's no way I can afford this place. It's like the most expensive restaurant in Atlanta." He's sitting there still thinking his buddy pranked him. And then these black fancy cars show up. The butler guy that opens the door, Randy Jackson comes walking out, and my friend's like, "Oh my gosh." And they had dinner together. And so Randy's like, "Come out west. I'm gonna get your music career going." So my friend calls me. He's like, "Paul," he's like, "Can you come live in my house for a year?" He's like, "I'm gonna go out and work with Randy Jackson, and I gotta go like on, in like a week or something." He's like, "My mortgage is $928, and if you can pay that, you can stay in my house for a year." And I said, "Cool, sign me up." So I didn't really have a job. I was flinging some vitamins out of my trunk at the time, but I didn't really have any like steady income. So, and I didn't have any responsibilities. I like literally just graduated college. So I move into his house, and I have to come up with $928, by like the first of the next month. And I'm super freaked out because I'm like, that's a bunch of money to me at the time coming out of college. So I'm thinking, how am I going to come up with $928? It might as well have been $1 million. I mean, that when you come out of college and you don't have a job, that's a lot of money. So I was walking through the neighborhood he lived in, and I saw a for sale sign in this cul-de-sac, and the grass was like 3 feet tall. I'm like, why would you sell a house if the grass is this high? So I called the real estate agent, and she thought I was calling to cut the grass. I was just calling to complain. And she's like, "What's your price to cut the grass?" And it was like a light bulb went off in my head because I was like, wait a minute, this is how I could get some money. So I was like, $60. And I just picked that number out of thin air because I mowed my parents' neighbor's house, Frank, for $20 in high school. So she said, "Sounds great." She says, "Here's my email address." She's like, "Send me a picture when you cut it. We'll cut you a check." So I borrowed my friend's mower. I didn't even ask him. He was out making music. I just took the mower out of the garage. I didn't even know you're supposed to weed eat and blow. I just went and started mowing. And, I took a picture afterwards, and lo and behold, the real estate agent cut me a check for $60. That was my first yard. And then she's like, she's like, "Can you do more yards?" I was like, "Absolutely." And so she started giving me addresses because the guy who was mowing the grass for the real estate agent was in the hospital. So I just started mowing grass. And next thing you know, I was like, this is how I'm going to make the money for the $928. And so I just started hustling in the neighborhood. And that's how I got my very, very, very humble beginnings. And then several months later, I got the big breakthrough, which is another story I wanted to tell you.
Dude, beautiful, man. But like, so it just kind of like happened. That was kind of like my story a little bit. Everything was kind of like divine intervention. Like things just lined up, and it was almost like that was the path that you were supposed to go down, right, Paul?
Yeah, 100%. I had a quick YouTube question for you. I wanted to share this live to my channel. You're the YouTube whiz. I hit share. I hit create post. Then what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, so I would just copy and paste the link in if you have not to the StreamYard, but like to the live stream itself. If you want me to, I can send you a link for it.
Yeah, it's all good. I don't know why something ain't working on my phone, but I'll just publish it afterwards. No big deal.
Beautiful.
So I didn't have any I had zero business skills. I had zero business knowledge. I was an employee up to that point. My biggest job, I got fired from Best Burger in high school. And then I worked in the dining hall in college. So my resume was absolutely pathetic.
Right.
And I was living in so after I lived in his house for a year, he moved back in and all that stuff. I ended up moving into an apartment complex. And every day when I would come home, this guy named Vic, he would just be out, smoking a cigarette, and he had a funny mouth on him. He'd be like, "Hey, what's up, Paul?" And I was like, "What does this guy do for a living? Like he never works." And so one day I get home from mowing, and he's like, "Hey, can you help me move a couch?" And I was kind of intimidated by the guy, so I wasn't going to tell him no, but I was like, "Sure, I'll help you move a couch." So he's like, "All right." And then he's like, "Get into my car." And he had this ghetto Toyota Corolla or a Camry or whatever it was, but it was like one of the older school ones from the 90s. It was old. So I thought he meant move a couch like in his apartment where we lived. Now I'm getting in this ghetto Toyota Corolla Camry, whatever it was, old one, all rusty. And I'm getting a little nervous. I'm like, man, I don't know what I got myself into. So we start driving. He's like, "Yeah, my sister just needs help moving a couch." And I'm like in his car thinking, I'm about to be on the news. You know what I mean? Like, what am I doing? So he's driving, and all of a sudden he gets to the gates of Sugarloaf Country Club, which is where Little Bow Wow lives, Matt Ryan at the time, the quarterback of the Falcons, and all these like rich people. It's all these humongous houses. It was like the marquee neighborhood in Atlanta at the time. A bunch of the Falcons players lived there, and all kind of famous people if you're into hip hop music and all that. So we get to the gate, and I'm like, "What the heck?" And he talks to the security guard, and the security guard opens the gate. And I've always heard about this neighborhood, and I've like peeked through the trees at it. And here we are driving around all these humongous houses. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And we go to his sister's house. Lo and behold, she lived in this neighborhood. And so I didn't have any filter. I met her. I said, "Hey, who takes care of your yard?" And I was like, "I could do a better job." And I was like, "Look at all those weeds." And I'm like, letting her know. She's like, "You know what? We're not too happy with the company." She's like, "Why don't you give me a quote?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so I emailed her a quote. I got the job like the next month or so. She finished out with the other company. She gave me a shot. She ended up being a real estate agent in that neighborhood. So then I started getting all kind of other houses in that neighborhood, which ultimately it's a long story. But I ended up getting the defensive coordinator, Atlanta Falcons, then the head coach, Atlanta Falcons, the captain, Atlanta Falcons. And I was doing a whole bunch of the Atlanta Falcons yards, kind of just learning the business on the fly. So I went from humble beginnings to like serving the rich and the famous pretty quickly.
One thing I want to point out with this story, Paul, and like I think a lot of people get this mistake, and whenever they first start a business, they figure the business is just going to kind of come to them. I love the story about how like you went out, you met with the real estate agent, and then this story about how you took an opportunity to go move a couch, and then you just came out and told this lady, because that's ultimately how some of this business is done. And unless you have the ability to talk to people face to face, you're not really going to make it happen. I think a lot of people think, I'll run some Facebook ads, things of that nature, but like you can grow a large business just networking this way, right?
Yeah, in that neighborhood, it's a gated community. You can do Facebook's ads to that community, but you can't do like door hangers or like you can't canvass the neighborhood. They have security guards that are driving around all the time. It's it's a high security neighborhood. And so I got another yard in that account who turned out to be a high-level CFO from Silicon Valley. And he had called me. He had called 3 people. Because he lives in San Jose, California. And he called the first person on Google. Google, you just typed into Google lawn care in Duluth, Georgia. And he called the first company. They didn't answer. Called the second company. They didn't answer. Called me. I was ranking 3rd on Google. So it is super important to do Google right. But he called me 3rd, left a voicemail. I listened to the voicemail pretty much in real time, and I immediately called him back. And he gave me his address, and I knew he lived in that neighborhood. So I was Johnny on the spot. I went over there, gave him a quote, got the job. And I didn't realize that his next door neighbor was a defensive coordinator, Atlanta Falcons. So we actually gutted everything in his front yard, put in new sod, new plants, we remodeled his yard and made it look fantastic for him in addition to mowing the grass. So one day, because he lives in California, this guy's so rich. If I told you the company he's the CFO of, everyone's heard of it. This guy's so rich that he has a vacation home in this Atlanta neighborhood just to take his buddies golfing a few times a year. Like they'll go to the Masters golf tournament and stay in Georgia. And then like, he's just so rich. It's just like a house he comes to a few times a year, which is mind boggling, but it's a whole nother world. So long story short, because we knew he didn't live there and he's never there, on Saturday mornings, I would always go do his yard. My schedule was really full. So Saturday mornings, I'm like, no one lives there. We'll go do his yard. So little did I know we were really annoying his neighbors. So I was at Home Depot one Saturday morning. Robert, who was working with me at the time, he called me. And I knew when I saw him call me, I'm like, this isn't good. Because Robert's kind of a go-getter. He's going to figure it out. He doesn't need to call me. So he calls me like, hey, Paul. He's like, I'm with the lady next door. And she's really upset that we're using the blower at 8 a.m, wanting me to stop. And so I was like, all right, I'll be right over. So I leave Home Depot. I come over. And I go, and the lady had left at the time, but she basically, chewed Robert out. Like, why are you guys using that blower at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning? So I go and I knock on the door, and she opens the door, and I just came out and apologized. I said, hey, ma'am, I just wanted to let you know, I apologize that we are a nuisance. And the reason we've been going there at 8 a.m. is because they don't live there. She's like, yeah, I know they don't live there, but can you do them on a different schedule? Because she's like, we have guests every weekend for the football games, and we just don't want you being there at 8 a.m. So I was very apologetic. I was very kind. And then I was like, absolutely, it'll never happen again. We'll leave right now, and I'll make sure we do it in the afternoon, on like a Tuesday afternoon or something. And then she's like, hey, by the way, she's like, you guys did a really good job with the remodel. And then her husband, I got to meet him. And long story short, they asked me for a quote to do their yard. And so I give her a quote. I end up picking up the job, and I was doing their property maintenance now for a few weeks. And I remember one time her husband came out, we were talking about limbing up the tree, and I was asking him how much of the tree he was comfortable with us limbing up and stuff to get some sunlight on the turf. And I just randomly was small talking with them. And I was like, hey, your wife mentioned you guys have guests in for the football game. And I thought she meant the Georgia Bulldogs. I just went to college football game. I was like, what team do you like? And he looked at me and he started laughing. He's like, the Falcons. And his wife was like, he's the defensive coordinator. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh, and I was like, cool. So anyway, they become actually good friends. And I've done all kind of work at their lake house, at their regular house. And when I would go on dates and stuff, they'd let me take their BMW to take out a girl. They've been awesome. They took me to the Atlanta. I got to go to so many Atlanta Falcons games. Like the year they went to the Super Bowl, I literally got to go in the locker room after they won the NFC Championship, and I'm hanging out. I got to pop champagne bottles with the team afterwards, and I was the designated driver, so I gave them a ride home. We went home from the NFC Championship. I dropped them off, and they're like, hey, you want to come in and watch the AFC Championship? It was New England. I think they were playing Houston Texans. And so I actually went to Carrabba's, picked them up dinner, came back, and I'm sitting there with the Falcons defensive coordinator watching the New England Patriots. And he's like, all right, Brady's going to check it. He's going to do this. And I'm sitting there, and then Tom Brady would do exactly what he says. Like, how in the world did you do that? And all game long, he's like, okay, the linebacker's coming around the corner. And then I was like, it was mind blowing. He predicted basically every play. He could just look at the TV and he knew what was going to happen. But all because of a lawn care business and networking some crazy opportunities have opened in my life. And then the guy who is the CFO, he actually invited, because when I started doing social media, he's like, hey, why don't you come out to San Jose and me and my wife can take you to Facebook and Google. And so I went out there in October. They took me to San Francisco 49ers game. And then they took me to Facebook, Instagram's across the street from Facebook. They took me to YouTube. They took me to the Googleplex. They took me to Apple. It was wild. And I got to see all those places. So it's wild, man.
Dude, we were just talking about before we got on here about all the ways you've leveraged your networking in order to meet and talk with different people. So I think if anybody were to take anything from this, it's the fact that they need to network better, because you've just been able to do so much just by talking to the right people, right, Paul?
Yeah, and serving them. I've never, well, I should say this. I did make some mistakes along the way, but what I learned is when you're in that level of the 1%ers, you never ask for anything. And we were talking about Shaquille O'Neal before we got on the call. I got to go to a party at his house with Greg Wittstock, and I was listening. I was eavesdropping on a conversation with Shaq and Greg, and Shaq literally told Greg, he said, you know what I like about you, Greg? And he literally told him, he's like, if you ever need anything, you need money for a charity, you need anything. He gave Greg like a blank check. It's like, if you ever need anything, he's like, I got you. And he's like, you know why? He's like, all these years, he's like, you've never asked me for anything. And so Greg just served Shaq and built him a dream. I don't even know how to explain it. Build him a dream yard with like putting holes, a pond, a beach. Like if you guys ever go on YouTube and look at Shaq's Pond 2.0, it's crazy what Greg built him. But in that whole process of Greg and his team being there, he was never like, hey, Shaq, can you get me an autograph, or can you get me tickets, or can you do? He just served him. And that's what I did with these people, is how can I make their yard look great? How can I go above and beyond? How can and I mean, sometimes it wouldn't even financially make sense. I would just like pour my heart and soul into going above and beyond. And they appreciated stuff like that. Like, for example, with the head coach, or he was the defensive coordinator. I also maintenance the head coach of the Falcons, but I knew the Falcons were playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I just had known from talking to his wife and stuff that after the game, they were flying back into Atlanta. I think it was a Monday night or Thursday night game. So they had played, and I'm like, I knew the next day was trash day. And so I had the garage code to their garage, because I would, they had like ice cream bars and Gatorades and water in the refrigerator for us. So we got to go in the garage. So I was like, I know he's not going to, his trash cans weren't out. So I was like, I just like took it upon myself. I opened the garage. I knew he's, down in Tampa Bay playing a football game, and his wife was out of town on work. So I literally took the trash cans out to the curb for him. And then he's like, he cusses a lot. He's like, you mother effer. He's like, thank you so much. And he's like, how did you think about that? And like, I would just do stuff like that. Even though I'm cutting their grass, I'm like, what else can I do to make their life better, to serve them? And it just, when like you do something for somebody, then they feel like they owe you a favor. And so that's just what happened with those people. And when the CFO would come home and wine and dine his rich friends and take them golfing, like the yard would be immaculate. Like I would have that place looking like Augusta National Golf Club. Even though he only paid me this to cut it, I would make sure it looks perfect. And stuff like that pays off over time, when most of the competition in the lawn care world, they do the bare minimum. Like we call them chucking the truck or staying in the van, or, they don't do a good job. And here I am like doing it with excellence. And it opened up all these crazy doors.
I love that. I love how you leverage your relationships. I love how you went above and beyond. Value first before you ask for anything. I think there's a couple different things people can take out of this. But the other thing was the speed to the quote. So like, had you not gotten to that quote super fast, you wouldn't have landed it. And I think that's where some of the people drop the ball at, is because the first and second company didn't answer the phone. Typically, whoever people get first, they're usually going to go with it if they need a service done. Right, Paul?
Yeah, I was number 3 on the Google My Business. And at the time, my business was actually called PJ Lawn, and I had a website, pjlawn.com, and I was crushing Google. So step 1, because I had an online presence, this is 2011, 2012. And I understood how important SEO was back then. So that put me in position to even get a call. And because company 1 and 2 didn't call him back within a few minutes, once I got the voicemail and I listened to it, and he said he lived on Oak Hill Overdrive or Overlook, I was like, oh, I know that street. I called him back. I was like, like I knew he was big money based on where he lived. And Johnny on the spot, I gave him a quote. I took care of it. And yeah, so that was super, super important. And even with the defensive coordinator, I could have just let it slide that day and just moved on. But I went over there to apologize. And Renee, that's the coach's wife, she ended up being just a world-class human being. And so, I think she kind of felt bad that she gave Robert a few words, and she, that was the smartest move I could have done, to go over and knock on the door and explain why I was at her neighbors at 8 a.m. and apologize and everything like that. And then one other thing about the quality of the work, when I was at Ken's house, that's the CFO, we did a great job, from the sod to the flowers to the plants to the pruning the Japanese maple. Like, everything we did was world class. And I didn't know that he was the defensive coordinator, but they would always go on walks in the evening, and him and his wife would be like, man, that looks great. Like, they took note to our level of excellence with the landscaping. So it all works together. You do quality work. You're Johnny on the spot with your communication. You're not afraid to network, and it's paid dividends. Like, I mean, you asked me off air, you're like, how did you meet Shaq? And I had to kind of think about it for a minute. I was like, oh yeah, Greg. But if you like trace it all back, it's just wild. Like, all because of mowing grass. Like, if you really take it full circle. So
I try to tell people, like, you're like only a couple conversations and connections away from things that you would never even know were possible. So I do want to ask you, were you in that neighborhood every Saturday at 8 a.m. for a particular reason? I know you said the guy wasn't typically there, but was it to kind of stay in front of the people in that neighborhood?
That would be next level thinking. So when I started my lawn business, I was broke, busted, and disgusted. I came out of college. I had no financial intelligence. I had no business knowledge. So I was living like robbing Peter to pay Paul, broke as you can imagine. So what I had to do is I had to take a job at Carrabba's, ironically, in the evenings as a server, just to make end meet. And the other thing was, my prices were too low in 2011, 2012, 2013, probably even in 2020, 2014. I think it was about when I realized I needed to raise my prices. So because I wasn't charging enough, I had to go get a job. So I could only work till about 2:30 p.m. And then I'd have to go get a shower. I'd have to clean myself up, and I'd have to be at Carrabba's at 4 p.m. And if I opened, I had to be there even earlier. So because of that and the workload that I had on my plate, I wasn't able to get it all done Monday through Friday. So I had to work on Saturday mornings, because I'd go in and work at Carrabba's Saturday evenings. That was like the busiest night. So I wasn't intentionally going there on Saturday morning because I knew everyone would be home. I had too much on my plate because I wasn't charging enough, and I had to have a night job at that point in my career. So that was the honest answer. But that does make sense that people were home on Saturday mornings for sure.
Especially in like the most, expensive neighborhood, you would think that might be a good time to get in front of, everybody in there. I do want to say this. I love the fact that you went and knocked on the door, because like, as a business owner, we wear so many hats, right? And so for you to get a call and for the lady to say she was upset, it would have been super easy for you to be like, hey, just tell her, we're sorry, or just kind of blow her off, whatever the case may be. But going in person and talking with her and settling it ultimately landed you like a lifelong friend and, a really great customer too, right?
Yeah, and then they ended up moving to Lake Oconee, and they called me and they're like, "Hey, do you want to work on this job?" And so it was actually Easter Sunday. I remember when I went out there to give them a quote, and I'm looking at this job and I'm like, "This would be the biggest job. This would be a huge job." And they bought this lake house, and it had all these trees along the lake. And she's like, "Here's the goal: we want all those trees down, and then we want to be able to see our lake from our back porch." And I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I was like, this is crazy. It's like the woods in her backyard. And so anyway, I was like, we'll do it. And so my buddy Chance Wrigley Tree Service, he gets out there and, cuts the trees down. And then, me and my crew, we go out and we clean everything up. I think we counted 117 stumps. It was absolutely insane. But while we're working, Ben, I know you're a big football fan, right?
Yep.
The neighbor's Ben Roethlisberger. I'm sitting there, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is the off season, so you got, I don't know exactly who this was a long time ago, but I think it may have been like, I forget who their wide receivers was. I think it was like Hines Ward, or I don't even know. But this was a while ago. But literally, I'm sitting there and I'm like, so I told Coach Smith, I was like, "Is Ben Roethlisberger your neighbor?" He's, "Oh yeah, he lives right over there, and he's got that big butt boat." And I was like, this is crazy. I'm like, that's Ben Roethlisberger. And so, because he has a vacation home in Lake Oconee in Georgia. So it was just wild. And we cleaned up all the trees. We did a great job. I can't tell you how many times I took their jet skis out. You know, we got to stay at their house while we're working, and then, you know, we'd work and then we'd go out on the jet skis and have fun. And so it's just like, it's wild, but it goes back to serving people and making their world better. And then they, in return, you know, want to bless you. So
Dude, I love that, Paul. That's probably going to be like the overarching message of, you know, this video we're doing today. Now, Noah sent in a couple super chats. Thank you, Noah. It's $3. He wanted his question answered, and I like this question because you have a particular mindset on this. Would hiring a business advisor be a good investment for a foundation? Now, you have a lot of coaches. I'm not sure exactly what this means. I'm assuming that he means like hiring a business coach to teach him, you know, about a new business opportunity. You have a lot of coaches. So can you speak to why you have so many coaches and why you like to invest in that?
yeah. So Noah and Justin can attest to this. One of my coaches, I pay $1,000 per hour, and I've done at least 14 or 15 1-hour sessions with this coach who's way further along in a sector of business than me. And I just like, hey, you know what you're doing, I don't. And you need someone who's credible. Just because you pay a lot of money to a coach doesn't mean they're any good. So I did my due diligence beforehand and found out this guy's the best at what he does. And so absolutely find somebody who's further ahead of you. And I was blessed, Justin and Noah, before I had the money, I had people who were willing to help me, and I didn't have to pay them. My friend Kenny, at the time in 2011, when I started, like right when I started, I asked him, I called him and I said, hey, Kenny, it's Paul. I don't know if you remember me. But I said, I started a lawn business. I know you've been at it for a while. I was like, I just want to know if we could grab a cup of coffee and you could show me the ropes. He was very generous. He took me to Panera Coffee. We sat down for probably an hour and a half, and he kind of, you know, gave me the lay of the land and taught me the basics. And he's the one who actually told me, because he worked in Country Club of the South, which was in a little different part of Atlanta where Alpharetta is. At the time, Whitney Houston lived in there before she passed away. I think Justin Bieber was living in there still at the time. Usher, they have all kind of, that neighborhood's pretty wild too. You got to go in a gate to get in the neighborhood. Then there's like another gate to get to Usher's house or whatever. So Kenny dominated that neighborhood. So he's like, you got to find a neighborhood like that and dominate. And he's like, that's where the money is. Go where the money is. And so when I got, and I'm going to answer Noah's question in a minute, but when I got to move that couch that day and I got into the neighborhood, I was like remembering all that. And I was like, this is my chance. This is my chance. Like, I got to get in this neighborhood. That's why I just blurted out. I literally think we were like moving the couch, and I was like, hey, you got a bunch of weeds in your yard. I was like, I'm a lawn expert. I can make it look great. And I'm literally pitching this lady with like enthusiasm, because I knew if I could get her, it's game on. You know what I mean? So anyway, what I wanted to tell Noah is now I pay a lot of money to my coaches. However, in those early days, $1,000, are you kidding me? I didn't have no $1,000 in 2011 to pay somebody, but I asked Kenny to go to coffee, and he said yes. And then there's a guy named Rich. He worked for Brickman, which I think is now called Brightview, but at the time they were the biggest company. And anyway, I asked him for some help, and he helped me for free. So if you don't have the money and you have a relationship with somebody who's further ahead of you that you trust, you could just ask them. But if you do have the money, I would absolutely invest in somebody who can speed up your process. And that man I pay $1,000 a month, or a coaching session to coach me, has helped me earn outrageous amounts of money, like way bigger of an ROI than that. So yes, get a business mentor. Absolutely. And then you have to remember this. Then you need to be a business mentor to somebody else. So I try to help, actually, not to toot my own horn, Justin, but this morning somebody came over. Let me see, that couch right there. They sat on that couch right there. I didn't charge them a penny. And I gave them business advice, you know, for a good solid hour or so. And I helped them, and I didn't charge them anything. And so it's like you give and you receive, you give and you receive. So
Right. And that seems like it's been your motto all along was giving more value than you're taking in, which I love, Paul. I think that's awesome. Okay, so I kind of want to get into the little bit more specifics on lawn care specifically. What services would we need to offer in order to get to, like, if we wanted to get to $1,000 a day? I mean, like, we couldn't go and cut, you'd have to cut, how many yards a day to get to that number.
Yeah, so I'm gonna reveal the secret to lawn mowing, and I'm gonna it's controversial. I'm gonna ruffle some feathers, but this is the truth. So I mentioned my friend worked at Brightview. It was Brickman back in the day. And if you looked at there's a magazine, Lawn and Landscape magazine, puts out the top 100 lawn and landscaping companies. And if you actually look at like the top 10, top 15, the only reason that they offer lawn mowing, the only reason I've been in these conversations with them behind the scenes. The only reason they offer lawn mowing is to put themselves in the best position to get the enhancement work. So the big money is in the enhancements, meaning the mulch, the pine straw, the fertilization and weed control, the tree installation, the tree pruning, all of that I call enhancements, meaning you're making the property better. But think about it like this. If you're a homeowner and you have somebody doing a really reliable job mowing your grass, you're more than likely going to ask them first, hey, can you do mulch? Hey, can you prune up that tree? Hey, do you do fertilizer? Hey, so really the person who does the lawn mowing more than likely is going to get the first at bat on all the enhancement work. And if you really know how to market, then you already be proactively, like, in advance, letting them know, hey, we're going to be doing flowers in May. Do you want some begonias? Or in the fall, hey, do you want some pansy flowers? So to be truthfully honest, and I do have people that listen to my podcast that only mow and they don't even offer enhancements and they make a profit mowing, and you can do that. But the secret that the top 10, the top 15 companies is they make a razor thin margin on the mowing. The only reason they do it is because now they're the go-to guy for the upselling all the big money jobs. So and I've done over 1,000 podcast episodes, and I've been very clear about that. I don't think it's a good idea to only do lawn mowing. I think you need to do lawn mowing with the skill set of marketing and upselling that you're going to do their mulch, their pine straw, their flowers, and then anything else you see along the way, a tree that needs limbed up, or a tree that falls down during a storm, and you have the equipment to tell them, hey, we'll chainsaw it up and haul it to the dump for you and stuff like that. So again, if you are doing lawn mowing, you have a huge advantage of the other companies who only do landscaping. So does that make sense?
Oh, no, absolutely. So essentially what lawn mowing is within the structure of your business is like a low cost leader. So like the way that like Costco offers like the chicken in the back of the store where they don't make any money on it and they actually lose money, it gives them the opportunity to get people into the store. I think that's beautiful. And I've always wondered, because it seems like lawn mowing is one of those things where it's kind of a race to the bottom a little bit and everyone's constantly undercutting each other. And so I've always wondered, how do you get to the big money in lawn care? And so it makes sense. I'm always preaching on the channel, like, once you go on somebody's property, they like you, you're trusted, they want to go with you, they want to bring you in to do as many services around the property as you possibly can. So that's I love that.
And the exception I would give from my market here in Atlanta is I have a friend, Josh. All he does is lawn mowing. However, he does what's called reel mowing. So that's when the mower spins like this and cuts it like this and cuts the grass like a half inch. Those are the mowers that they use on the putting greens, the fairways, the tee boxes for golf. And so a lot of folks, because we have Augusta National Golf Club here in Georgia, a lot of people are like, I want my yard to look like a golf course. And so you can actually put what's called a growth regulator on the lawn so it doesn't grow too frequently, and you can cut it with a reel mower. Well, now, and Josh has some customers he does 3 times a week. So the regular guy is just mowing once a week. Josh is mowing 3 times a week, and he's doing a specialty mow, and he's charging, in some cases up to double the price. And so that's where the money is if you are going to do lawn mowing, is you do specialty reel mowing like that. I was just hanging out with a YouTuber, Jason Creole from the Lawn Care Life channel. Last week we're at Exmark in Nebraska, and he was like, you know what? He had 2 lawn mowing businesses, and he's out there sweating on his lawnmower. And I think he was charging $45 to cut this person's yard. And the Furt and Squirt guy shows up, and Jason was on the property for almost an hour. by the time he mowed, then he had to weed eat and edge, and then he had to blow. It was about an hour for his $45 back in the day. And he watched these Furt and Squirt guys show up, and they go and they're there for 8 or 12 minutes, and they do their little wands, and they're not even sweating. And he asked him one day, he's like, "Hey, what do you charge her?" The guy's like, $72 or $75, $80. And he's sitting there and he's like, "All right, you were here for 8 minutes or 9 minutes or 12 minutes. You're not sweating, and you made $80. Now I know there's material costs and all this, but his brain was going. And he's like, here I am for an hour sweating like crazy in Alabama. I'm sure it's hot in Louisiana like it is here in Georgia and Alabama. And so he just got to thinking, he's like, what am I doing? And so literally now he sold his lawn mowing business because of math. And all he does now is Furt and Squirt, meaning he does 7 applications a year of fertilization and weed control, and he does 0 mowing. And so I guess I'm known as the lawn mowing guy, but I want to be clear to people. Like, if you go into this with only cutting grass, you're missing the point. The big companies are cutting grass to do enhancements. And then there's other people like Jason, who's like, forget cutting grass. I'm going to do fertilizer and weed control. Now, me personally, I don't like the smell of glyphosate. I don't like the smell of chemicals. I don't want to deal with that crap. So, and I think it's therapeutic to mow, but I'm not a big into Furt and Squirt. Even for 10 years, I always subcontract out to my buddy Russell Skipper. But I just want to be honest with people. I don't want to persuade people to go mow grass. I want to persuade people to go mow grass, learn how to market, and then make sure you're the person. This was a crazy story, Justin.
Yeah.
Guy's name's Luke out in Sacramento. He called me one day. I do one-on-one coaching where I coach people, and he one of my students, and he was telling me, he's like, dude, guess what happened, Paul? He said, I showed up to my customer's house and somebody else was core aerating, and he felt like his wife was cheating on him. He's like, what are you doing? And he after he saw the guy leave with the core aerator, he told the customer, he's like, I do core aerating. And they said, we didn't know. And I was like, Luke, you gotta market. Like, you gotta tell them in advance. Like, if you, California is different than Georgia. We core aerate here late April, early May. But so you got to tell them in advance before you get to April and May that, hey, we offer core aerations, and you can use MailChimp or one of the email services to let your customers know we offer this service. Here's when we do it, and get them signed up. So, but you want to be getting all that low hanging fruit: aerations, fertilizer and weed control, flats of flowers, pine straw is huge in Georgia. Some of y'all don't know what that is. Mulch in your neck of the woods, maybe. That's what you want to be doing if you're doing lawn mowing. So I know a lot of people just start off with lawn mowing, and the numbers won't work if all you do is mow and your prices aren't high enough and you're not efficient. But if you can get those other enhancements dialed in, then the lawn maintenance world makes a lot of sense.
Okay, beautiful. I love that you came on and shared that, because like I said, I've always been curious how they make it work. One of the things that my buddy Judd told me one time is that we need to switch the framing of how we think about it. We need to go from service businesses that market to marketing businesses that offer services, because at the end of the day, it's a game of who has the best marketing, right, Paul? Like, you could have an inferior product, like that guy might have been inferior at aerating. However, since the customer was aware that he aerated, they went in and brought him in, right?
Yep. It was a wake-up call for Luke, and the entitlement that he just assumed his customers knew. No, you got to let him, you got to be out in front of that. And so it was a wake-up call for him. But core aerations, like, it's a no-brainer. If you're mowing someone's yard, you absolutely I've actually talked to a guy, Helena Chemical. They sell the pre-emergence and all that stuff. And I was talking to Warren. He's like the main guy there one day. He's like, you want to know what the best thing you can do for a yard is, Paul? And he sells all this chemical. He's like, it's a core aeration. And he's like, I don't make a dime from core aerations. But he's like, I'm telling you, that's the most healthy thing you can do for turf, because it lets all that air get down to those roots, which makes them stronger to fight off weeds. And basically, in 2011 and 12, I was trying to do fertilization and weed control. And that's when I was always going to Helena, and I was always talking to Warren, and he would explain this stuff to me. And then one day, it was funny, Justin, he sat me down, because I'd always go in there and I'd always be nervous. Like, hey, I take a picture of a weed. I'm like, what's this? What I got to buy for that? And he sat me down one day. He's like, Paul, because I'm going to be honest with you. He's like, call Russell Skipper. And so I called Russell Skipper, who lives in Atlanta. I was like, hey, Warren told me to call you. And so from that moment on, Russell, who has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably even over 1,000 customers now, I just subcontract everything out to him. So, for example, I charge my customer $400 a month to mow, edge, trim, blow, fert, and squirt 8 times a year. And then Russell would send me invoices and I would just pay him, but I'd give him the addresses. And then he kept all my yards weed free, because I was starting to play with the 1%ers, the pristine, the nicest yards in Atlanta. And I wasn't competent what I was doing. So Warren was like, you don't want to screw up the head coach Atlanta Falcons yard. You know what I mean? So he's like, just call Russell Skipper and have an expert do it. So
that's beautiful. So you referred the leads out to him and you got like a commission on it essentially?
Well, we kind of, the way we worked it out is I would give him the address and he was using something, I think it was called Real Green or something, the CRM he was using. So he would look at everything, as his wife Amber would look it up, and she'd be like, okay, that's going to be $62 a service. So I would quote, when I'm quoting the customer, I have a way I'm quoting the job. I'm like, okay, and we do year-round service in Atlanta in this neighborhood. So it's like, okay, 52 services a year at $75 a pop. And then I'd put in, if I'm going to do whatever else I'm going to do on the property. And then I would do, okay, 8 services. If Russell's going to charge me $62, I might be like, okay, 8 services at $85. So it's just a small little spread. So I didn't like get a commission kickback from Russell, but I would make a spread in the price that I would give the customer. So I would give them one price. And this is another thing, Justin. I made it so convenient for them. I use a CRM jobber. I would say, okay, it's going to be $400 a month. That includes your mowing, edging, trimming, blowing, a light pruning up like a canopy on the trees every year to like 10 feet. And that includes your fertilization and weed control. So I offer them all of that, make it super easy. And I say, all you got to do is, we'll get a card on file and I'll charge it the first of the month. So January 1, you'll get charged $400, February 1, all the way through the year. Obviously we'll be here more in June, July than we will be in January, February, but we'll do all of that, make it super convenient for them. And then I let them know in advance, we also offer mulch. We also do flowers. We also do queriations. That's extra, but I'll let you know the price ahead of time and, always in writing, get their agreement. And then you just charge the card on file. So making things convenient so they don't have to pay a fertilization company and then pay a lawn guy and then pay an aeration company. I'm the one-stop shop. And
I love that.
Yeah.
And then, because one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up is like a lot of people are afraid to bring anybody else into their businesses. Like maybe they're going to be competition, but you have a little bit more of a collaborative, I feel like, with bringing him in to kind of do part of it. So would you advise, maybe teaming up with people rather than going the opposite way?
It's dangerous. If you have a quality subcontractor, my first few years, I was swinging and missing on irrigation guys. I had some crooks. This one guy, really bad situation I went through with the irrigation guy. Eventually, I found Rich, who is excellent. He does irrigation and he also does lighting. I found an amazing Georgia certified landscape professional who can design, like on the grid paper, draw out the whole house and put where the plants are going to go and do all of that. I didn't know how to do that, in the early days. I've taken classes and I've learned more about that, but I found someone, Jamie Germain, she does it amazingly. So over time, I built a team to cover everything. I didn't do stump grinding, but I found Scotty. He does amazing stump grinding work. And I found Chance, like I mentioned earlier, who, did the 115 trees. Now, some of them were big, some of them were small. I guess 115 stumps would be the better way to say it. But that was above my skill set, swinging around like Tarzan up on these huge trees over a lake. You know what I mean? The tree falls down and hits Ben Roethlisberger, right? No.
Right.
But I found people who are reputable. And once you get a team of people you trust, then it just makes it so pleasurable. Because then when they have a pleasant experience with Scotty grinding the stump or Chance cutting down the tree or Jamie doing a big level installation or whatever, it makes me look good. Vice versa, if they do a bad job, it makes me look bad. But I surround myself with A+ winners, like A, meaning these guys are the best. And so you need your team to be excellent if you are going to get subcontractors.
Okay, completely agree. I kind of want to touch on a couple more things. You got yourself in front of the right customers, Paul. How would you recommend that others do the same? I know you said one was through Google, and then from there you kind of leveraged, the lady who had the complaint. But what are some other ways that you got in front of the right customers? Because people that get into, maybe some smaller neighborhoods, it's not where the money's really at in some of this maintenance stuff.
When I met with Kenny at Panera, he told me to go where the money is. There's a famous bank robber that Larry King, the great interviewer, was interviewing. This guy was in prison and they caught him and all this stuff. They brought him out of jail or prison for the interview with Larry King. And Larry King's sitting there and they're like, and this guy robbed so many banks and got away with it for so long, eventually got caught. But they're like, why did you rob the banks? And the bank robber like looked at Larry King like, that's a dumb question. He's like, that's where the money is. So you want to go where the money is. Landscaping is a luxury service. The people on the poor end of town, right? They're spending their money on lottery tickets and vaping and like they're not spending their money on sod and flowers and stuff like that. I'm not saying, I got to be careful how I say this, but the wealthiest zip code in your area, those are the people that take pride in not cutting their grass on Saturdays, but spending time with their family. And they take pride in their yard looking nice, and they're spending money on this stuff. So what I would suggest is find that neighborhood in Atlanta, right? It's Country Club of the South. It's I worked in St. Ives Country Club. I worked in River Club in Swanee. That's where the head coach of Atlanta Falcons live. Now they fired him, but it's a whole nother story. But Sugarloaf Country Club in Duluth. Like, find out where is the nicest country club in your city. I grew up in Canton, Ohio, right? The nicest country club was called Glenmore. If I was in Canton, Ohio, I would run Facebook ads. You can make a geoperimeter, right? You teach Facebook. You probably know this. You can draw a map around where you want to market. I would market to that neighborhood on Facebook. If you're going to do mailers, mail to that neighborhood. If you can get into that neighborhood physically, go to that neighborhood. So go where the money is and then get a route density in that neighborhood. And the only way that works is if you have a squeaky clean reputation, because when you're in the country club where they're all multimillionaires or millionaires, you have to be a multimillionaire to be in Reynolds Plantation where Ben Roethlisberger and Coach Smith live. Multimillionaire. You can't be a millionaire and survive there. It's big money there. But guess what? All them people talk at the pool together. They talk at the tennis and the pickleball courts together. They talk at their cookouts. If somebody does good, word spreads fast. If somebody says does bad, word spreads fast. So in those rich communities where I recommend you working, they're strong community people. That's how they got wealthy. They understand networking and they network together. So my suggestion is go where the money is and then market to that neighborhood. And it's changed my life. Working for over a decade, I worked in those three neighborhoods: River Club, St. Ives, Sugarloaf Country Club. And it's all big money, right? It's dentists, it's business people, it's CFOs, it's the athletes. They even have, I don't want to get your channel flagged. There's high-end people, even that they're crooks, live in those neighborhoods until they get caught. So, but that's where the money is. Go where the money is, market to that. Don't waste your time. Like if you're in the restaurant industry, then you can serve food to the poor and the rich. Whoever wants a hamburger can get a hamburger, right? If you're talking about $10,000 jobs to remodel someone's front yard, only the richer in volume are spending money on those luxury services. And don't fool yourself. Landscaping is a luxury service. So you gotta know that. And I have guys I do coaching calls. They live in like rural Illinois and they're like, Paul, my customers are missing their teeth and they live on like 10 acres and they want bi-weekly cuts. And I was like, that's part of why. There's a book by I'm not Jewish, but I read a book by this Jewish guy named Daniel Lapin, and he explained why the Jews are the wealthiest people in the world. The book's absolutely fascinating. It's called Thou Shalt Prosper. And he explains that in like the Forbes 400, the 400 wealthiest people in America, the Jewish population is less than 1%. Yet on that list, I think they have like 40% of the people are Jews or 25% of the people. It's crazy. There's like over 100 people on that list are Jewish people, yet their population is only 1%. So in this book, he explains how they do this. And how they do it is they stick together in a community. And he explained in a city, you have more opportunity. And so if you're going to start a landscaping business, I wouldn't do it in rural Illinois. No offense to my boy Aaron's Lawn Care out there who I'm talking about. But if you come to Metro Atlanta, guess who lives here? Shaquille O'Neal. Guess who lives here? Cardi B, Offset, the athletes, the Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson actually was my neighbor. It's a crazy story. It's a true story. Allen Iverson lived in my apartment complex. He spent his $200 million and went broke. And he lived in my apartment complex in Atlanta. But true story. Ric Flair, I used to see him all the time, the wrestling guy. I'd see him all the time at Kroger. And all these people live in Atlanta. So go to Atlanta, go to Tampa, go to Dallas, Fort Worth. The point of that book is you got to go where the money is. When you go to where the opportunity is, when you go to the money is, then you have so much more opportunity. So I would say if you have a home service-based business, don't be living out in Timbuktu. Go to an Atlanta white hot market, Charlotte, Nashville, Dallas. I don't have a list in front of me, but do those cities make sense, Justin, where there's opportunity?
Absolutely. I wanted, you said you didn't want to ruffle any feathers. I've made like several shorts on this notion of like, go where the money is. And essentially, like, there's two types of people, right? There's the people that value the time more than the money that they would spend to have the service done. And that's really who you want to target. And then there's people that value the money that they're going to spend over the time that they're going to be relieved of by not having to do the service. So essentially, two types of people. You got to go where the money is, because then those people value their time more than the money they spend to do the service.
And once I did the Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator, he was my first one. Then he's like, hey, Paul, he's like, we got a new coach coming in from the Cowboys, Coach Henderson. I want you to be Johnny on the spot. Take care of him. So then I went over and I did Jerome Henderson's yard for years. And then now I'm doing Coach Smith's yard. I'm doing Jerome Henderson's yard. So now Ricardo Allen, he moves into the neighborhood. And I just mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing your coach Jerome Henderson, and who Ricardo played defense. So Jerome Henderson was like his immediate coach. And I was like, yeah, and I also do Coach Smith's yard. And he's like, okay, I know their names. I know where they live. So I instantly had credibility with them. He's like, yeah, sign us up, dude. So now I do Ricardo Allen. So then when Robert Alford came to the Falcons, I was talking, Ricardo Allen's wife talked to his wife. I go over there. I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing Ricardo Allen. I'm doing Coach Smith. It was like this never ending chain. So then I got Robert Alford. So then Raheem Morris moves in next to Robert Alford. And I'm like, I tell his wife, like, oh yeah, we do Robert Alford. We do Ricardo Allen. We do Coach Smith. We do Coach Henderson. And so now I have all the credibility in the world. Like, oh yeah, sign us up. Then I do them. Then the business people are like, man, you're hanging out with all the Falcons. Like, who are you? And I'm like, so it's like, Greg Whitstock, for example, he did Shaq's yard. You know how much credibility that is when Shaq goes to just some wealthy doctor's house that says they want a pond, and they go on his website and they see him with Shaq. Now he has a credibility. If you go to my Instagram reels, I have pinned the work I did for Lowe's and me with Shaq. So now when all the other brands go and they're like, oh, wait a minute, this guy works with Lowe's and Shaq. Like, will he be even? Are we even worthy to send him an email? And I don't know how to explain this without coming across. I don't want to come across as haughty, but you have to get some of those big people in your community, and they don't have to be athletes or celebrities. They could be a rich doctor with a good reputation, but you need to get some of those notable clients, and then you need to feature them on your website. Like, we've done work for this person, or if you can get their endorsement, that's the best. So you got to start somewhere until you can get your at bat with one of them. And then, like I shared my example of name dropping all those names, I would literally, that was my marketing plan. When I'm in the neighborhood, I would intentionally name drop. Oh yeah, I do so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And they all know who those people are. So it's like I had all the credibility in the world. And Justin, guess what? I had the highest prices in the neighborhood. I had premium pricing, and I could demand it because I had that reputation that I had an impeccable reputation. I still do because I value that. So
I love that. Honestly, when you get to this different tier of customer, they want to pay a higher price. They kind of scoff a little bit at lower end pricing. And that was a real, mental shift for me, was that these people want to pay more. Cause like one time we did a commercial bid and we lost out on it. We charged, we were quoted at $10,000. The person who got the bid was at $30,000. And it really like shook me for a while. How could somebody charging 3 times more than me get the job? And it's because at some point with these people, they associate a higher cost with a higher quality. And especially when you team that up with all the other, resources and other people, I think it just works out for you to make more money, right?
And there's so much research about that. I'm not in the handbags, but like the Louis Vuitton handbag, it's the same one as the ghetto one at Walmart, right? I mean, if you look at them, they're not that different if you took across the logo and the branding, and people will pay outrageous amount of money for the Louis Vuitton, or you fill in the blank. Like, the Rolex watch, if you look at it, it ain't that different than a watch you could pick up at Walmart, but people will pay thousands and thousands of dollars more for it. It's the same in the home service industry. When you're in those neighborhoods, it's weird the way they work, and they call it keeping up with the Joneses and all this stuff, but it's like they want to pay more. They want their car to be more. One of my customers had a Lamborghini and a Ferrari stacked on top of each other in his garage. He had like this car thing. I don't even know how to explain it, but they would, because he only had a 3-car garage, and they would stack, and they just like they wanted to pay more. That guy had a tennis court in his backyard and a swimming pool and all kind of interesting things. But like,
Right.
yeah, they literally don't want they want to pay the best guy premium price, and then they brag about their friends like, oh yeah, so and so was our builder, so and so is our painter, or so and so is our landscaper, stuff like that. So
Right. They want to work with the best in their city. And when you kind of position yourself as that person, and then Paul, I'm gonna ask you one more question, then we could wrap. But like, as far as, within this space, there's a lot of saturation. I think there's a lot of people that obviously have lawnmowers and want to provide a service. So let's say you were to restart your entire business in a new space. How would you gain a competitive advantage over, just anybody else in the truck? You know what I mean? And how could you kind of leverage up like you did?
yeah, if I could start over, I would have went out to Reynolds Plantation. Giving you guys free advice here. Tony Rudolph, if you're listening, I'm sorry, man. My boy Tony's crushing it out there. I would go out to Lake Oconee. That's where it's the third, last I saw, it was the third wealthiest per capita region in America. So I'm sure the Hamptons up in New York. I don't like cold weather, so I wouldn't go there. But there's big money in the Hamptons, right? There's big money in Lake Oconee. If you go to Nashville, right, or wherever, look up where is the highest per capita income wealthy region. So I would start there. I would only build my business there, which I know where it is in Georgia. It's in Metro Atlanta, and it's in Lake Oconee. So I would go there, and I would rinse and repeat. I would do the mowing to get all of the enhancement work, and I would do that. Now the big money is in the hardscapes, but to be honest, I don't like hardscapes. Like I just don't. That's not my flow. It's like, it's therapeutic to me to mow grass. It's therapeutic to me to do sod installations. I like doing that stuff. It's like a hierarchy. It's like mowing grass is at the bottom, then the mulch, pine straw, stuff like that. And then the installations where you actually dig a hole and you put a tree or plant in the ground. And then the hardscape, that's like the next level tier where like the profit margins are bigger. But I mean, that's basically the recipe. But if I could just get a few customers that are super wealthy and just kind of take care of their yard, there's one in Sugarloaf Country Club. There's one house. They had a lawn care guy. They paid him an annual salary, but part of it was he could only have one customer, them. And these people are so rich. It's absolutely crazy. They had like 12 or 14 of the most exotic cars you've ever seen in their gigantic mansion. And I'd always drive by, because you have to go by their house to like go to all the other houses in the neighborhood. And their landscaper was always smiling. He was just chill, as cool as a cucumber. He's always smiling. We're all stressed out, and he's so happy. And those people are so rich, but they just hired one guy to take care of their property. And you can get to kind of that level. But I would go to those neighborhoods and work for very, 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 very rich people and make them super happy. That's what I would do.
I love how you said that you would move to where the money is. I think that's another one of the themes of this video, because a lot of people are like, well, Paul, I want to make it happen here. Well, it's like, maybe where you're at isn't the best location for,
And there's a list that you can look in. I live in Forsyth County right now. I'm fixing to move, but I live in Forsyth County. We're the number one wealthiest county in Georgia, and we're ranked 14 or 13 in America. Look at that list. Now, outside of Washington, D.C. is like the top 5 or 6 counties. Then like your New York City suburbs are up there. And then it's the L.A. ones. Then it's, I think it's called, I forget the name of the county. It's the Franklin Brentwood area in Tennessee, which is a suburb of Nashville. I think that's ranked 13 in Forsyth County here in Atlanta is 14. We're like neck and neck. For Nashville and Atlanta is like the first cities to rank outside of that D.C., New York City, L.A. market. But look at that chart. And I got a friend up in Indiana who's always complaining to me about how there's no opportunity up there. I'm like, dude, get your butt down to Atlanta or Nashville or Dallas or one of these cities, Charlotte. Charlotte is booming. I was just there last week. Dallas is booming. Nashville, I'm going there next week, is booming. Atlanta, you know how many celebrities are moving from LA here? It's crazy. like you got to come to one of these cities. And so, and I'm not saying I just named 4. I don't like cold. I don't like cold weather. So the New Yorks and stuff like that's not on my list. But like, look into Charlotte. And if you are going to move to Charlotte, like look into where's the wealthiest part of Charlotte. And if you can't afford to live there, live 12 miles over where you can afford, but build your business in that neighborhood. If you're in Atlanta, build your business in Forsyth County or over in Lake Oconee, which is in the middle of our state. So absolutely, you got to be in Tampa, Dallas. I mean, Florida's got so many cities. I mean, Naples, I don't know. I don't want to name them all, but Florida's like, dude, get your butt down to Florida. No state income tax. There's money all over Fort Lauderdale, Naples, all over the state. So yeah, you got to go to a market where there's opportunity. And I'm not eloquently saying it, Justin, but, and this is hashtag not sponsored or anything, but thou shall prosper. Again, I'm not Jewish. I'm not propagating that. I'm just saying the Jewish people are so rich, and there's a reason why, and the book actually tells you. And part of their secret is, guess where they live? New York City, right? Los Angeles. They go to these opportunity places, and they understand that we got to go to a place where there's opportunity, and they migrate to cities. There are more cities than just that, but that's a big part of their success. Is they don't live out in the middle of Kansas. They live where there's opportunity to rise to the top of the real estate market, the banking. They're huge in the banking and investing. And so they go to those capitals of those industries.
I love that though. I love that mindset of move to where it's at, because I've never heard that before. Last question for you, Paul. If you were to do anything different with your business, you know what I mean? What would it have been? Or were there any big mistakes that you made?
Oh yeah. I alluded to it earlier, Justin. I didn't know my numbers. 2011, 12, 13, 14. I had dumb luck because somebody at the nursery told me to triple my price. So like if I'm doing a landscape install, he's like, yeah, just add up how much the plants cost, the trees, the flowers, whatever you're doing, the sod. And he's like, just triple it. So that's all I knew. So I would do that and it would work. And I made a bunch of money on installs. But when it came to mowing, I didn't really calculate my numbers and I didn't know my break-even point. And so long story short, my mowing prices were so low because I was talking to the other guys like, hey, what do you charge? And they're like $45. I'm like, okay, sounds good to me. $45. And my prices were so low. And I had John Pajak. I did like a 4-hour coaching call with him and he walked through all my numbers. My mentor, Rich, had me print out all my bank accounts and he went through all that with me. And basically they diagnosed my prices were too low. So I spent 3 or 4 years literally working at Carrabba's because my business I was busy. I had good customers, but I wasn't making enough money. It was all because my prices were too low. And it was part of my mentality too. I didn't have enough like worth or confidence to charge, to put my shoulders back and to tell the customer a higher price. And now now I'm confident in doing that. More confident in doing that. But that was one mistake I made. And I went through several bookkeepers, but when I hired a good one, they're down in Pensacola, Florida, the Coberleys, Megan and Joey Coberly. They really helped me understand my balance sheet, my statement of cash flows, my profit and loss statement. I just talked to them a few days ago. We go through all my numbers. They point out how I'm performing, what I could be doing better. So in a summary, I would say know your numbers, like really know your numbers and charge what you're worth. Like charge more. If you're doing a good job, charge more than you are right now. And if everyone's telling you no, then maybe your price is too high. But until you're getting a steady dose of no's, keep seeing if you can raise your prices. And that's with the asterisk that you're doing quality work. You can't be out there doing shoddy work and charging a lot. But if you're actually serving your customers well, charge for it. So that was my biggest mistake. I wish I would have learned sooner, is to know my worth and charge more and get my financial organization faster. Now I dot my I's, cross my T's, and I feel like I understand what's going on. But yeah, I should have done that a lot sooner.
I think that's one of the things that everybody kind of starts with, because in the beginning, you don't really know your value, right, Paul? It's just kind of like, you're just kind of going about it. You're excited about big opportunities and you kind of undercut yourself because you're like, I don't want to lose out on this. So I think it's all about that, the evolution of the business. In the beginning, you start low, and then over time, you start to realize your value a little bit more, and you start to be like, hey, how can we maximize on the amount of jobs that we do? Because you realize your time is finite. There's only so many yards you can cut in a day, only so many customers you can service in a day. So completely agree with that. Paul, every guest that comes on the channel has to pick the word of the day. What would you like the word of the day to be?
The word of the day?
Yeah, it could be any word. Doesn't matter.
Money.
The word of the day is money. If you guys made this far in the video, comment down below money and I'll hashtag your real one. Paul, anything else before we wrap this, man? And where
I
can
know
people
you're a
find
big
you at?
pressure washing guy. I'm going to Nashville, Tennessee next week to the huge convention. I'll be podcasting there. Pretty cool opportunity. So I'm an absolute rookie at pressure washing. I actually did a job after you were on my show, I think I did a good job. So I took your advice and I did the double thing, and the customers was pretty happy. So
was there any lines in the concrete?
No, not this time. It looked like the Cincinnati Bengals beforehand.
Right.
I went back to that customer's yard, made it right for him. He's my friend, so it was low pressure, but I made it look good. So
beautiful, beautiful, man. And what he's talking about is the cross hitting the driveway if you're not using chemicals. It's a great way to go. In the beginning, Paul, I'll be honest with you, before I knew that, it was like a big mind boggler. I was like, I don't understand why there's lines in this concrete. I'm taking my time. I feel like I'm doing a good job, but you don't know what you don't know. And when you start implementing certain things, it starts moving the business along. And that's why we make these videos, man, to help people out. So Paul, thanks for coming on, man. And until next time, hustle hard and get that money, baby. Peace.